1 minute remaining. Andrea, who is our first candidate?
We welcome Jacob McGregor from Ward 1.
Thank you everybody, and I'm so glad to be here because these are issues that are obviously deeply personal to myself as a Calgarian with a disability, and I'm so glad to see so many people engaged in making this an issue in this election. So I'll start by saying we've come a long way as a city. When I grew up in the 1990s, only part of the Calgary Transit bus fleet was accessible, and all of the train cars basically were still the first generation U2s. So getting on the train in a mobility device was a bit of a struggle if there were a crowd or during rush hour periods. We also have one of the best door-to-door accessible transit systems in Calgary Transit Access in the country. And the new wheelchair accessible vehicle taxi service is a gigantic step forward to mobility in this city. However, we have a lot of work to do because as was noted earlier, there's a significant deficit in affordability in Calgary. An ACE check only goes so far. So council absolutely needs to focus on closing that affordability gap. We need to make sure that developers are incentivized to partner with the city on affordable housing projects. I think this can be done through reduction in red tape, as well as allowing developer partners to put their name on affordable housing projects. These companies love to put their name on altruism. So why don't we make that a standard and allow them some incentive to partner on affordable housing? As far as the built environment, having door knocked during this process, I can tell you we have a lot of work to do. Sidewalks and pathways without curb cuts or with poorly cut curb cuts are just not acceptable for a city that wants to be inclusive. But outside of the built environment, we have to remember that mental health and less visible disabilities are causing some of the worst damage. That's why part of my vision for Ward 1 is a city curated online mental health portal to provide a place to start for Calgarians looking to find services, as well as a pilot program similar to the fair entry and low-income transit pass programs to remove barriers of cost from seeking mental health services. Speaking of fair entry, and
you had 1 minute left.
Speaking of fair entry and the low-income transit pass, these are incredibly important programs that make it much more affordable for low-income Calgarians with disabilities to live in the city. I have lived these issues. I want to be a voice in helping us move forward into a barrier-free YYC. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob McGregor. We'd love to hear from Sonya Sharp, Ward 1.
Good evening, everyone. Hopefully you can hear me okay. I'm so glad to be here and speaking with you all. I just wanted to just say thank you so much, Jacob, for your platform, and I really appreciate that we're here together tonight. I'm very passionate about a fair and equitable city for all residents and Ward 1, and that's why hearing from everybody here is really important to me. Being an ex-city employee for 20 years, I actually have seen firsthand how challenging it can be to ensure accessibility lens is incorporated into our capital projects and incentives. Most recently is our patio program that we launched in 2019, 2020, and 2021. Regarding our, 4 council priorities, we have many areas within the means to create a more accessible, friendly city for all Calgarians. And really, it starts with the planning world and the urban planning. And accessible Calgary starts at that stage. So when we establish communities and we pursue redevelopment and new communities, especially that we have a lot coming up in Ward 1, we need to intentionally plan and design these communities with universal accessibility so that where all Calgarians can access amenities and participate in community as a priority. Some of these examples are good transportation. And I know that councillors' jurisdiction will be kind of out of this purview, but it's up to us also to work with the province and Alberta Health Services to build that tight relationship and see what they can do for hospitals. Really also, which else is important is accessibility of our parks, our green space for wellness. Ward 1 has incredible park space, and we want to make sure that they're accessible to all. Accessibility to our restaurants and our arts and culture and venues. Again, going back to the patio example, I have firsthand experience and lessons learned of how we could have made that better. Talking about a city that moves and creating a barrier-free city, we absolutely need to apply the accessibility lens to everything the city does. Talking about transportation, in Ward 1, as I've been door knocking, we've heard from some residents that have described some areas of food deserts with the lack of public transit to grocery stores that becomes inaccessible. So that's a big problem in Ward 1. We need to make sure that, while we're working with our transit, we must plan around universal accessibility with all social considerations, including fixed routes, door-to-door, universal access to the BRT, the bus rapid transit, and continuation of low-income transit paths. As well, when it comes to, every winter we hear about the same stories about how the snow and ice removal have been impacted by those with physical disabilities and abilities. I have elderly parents, so I've seen this firsthand. We need to make sure that we define the city we've defined this as a council priority and a priority to expand the clearing of sidewalks and pathways, and we need to improve that strategy. As a well-run city with leadership and working with community, I will very much advocate for council decisions to have an equity, diversity, and inclusion lens to all budget decisions on capital projects, including accessibility lens on that. And one thing that's important as we move forward is making sure that we include the disabled community to the table in city activities and initiatives, and not only including them at the table and hearing from them, but what are we doing with that engagement? That's also really important. A prosperous city working with the province, affordable housing. This has come up time and time. Our city is unfortunately still behind in providing adequate affordable housing. We have a couple of projects going in Ward 1 right now, and our municipal government needs to continue prioritizing these capital projects and operating investments for the city as affordable housing units. And
I give you 1 minute warning time. You got 1 minute. Okay.
Thank you. And securing operating dollars at the planning stage can often be overlooked. So again, going right back to the planning world. And so this funding will actually require a strong relationship from the city, the federal, and the provincial government. And continuing the advocacy with the provincial and federal government and how critical they are in funding to support our accessible Calgary. We need to have that better relationship so that AISH can continue and to help ensure citizens can afford to live in Calgary. Hearing that price discrepancy is actually really important, and continued funding for fair entry. So that's kind of the role I would like to take, talking about the council priority. And as a hopeful Ward 1 councillor, my commitment is to ensure I hear from this community and find every opportunity to ensure an accessible lens is included for parks, transportation, city walkways, pathways, and importantly as well is helping that all work together and setting up our businesses. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Thank you, Shauna, or Sonya is what I mean to say. Now we welcome our next candidate, Brent Trenholm from Ward 3.
Hello, thank you for this opportunity. I think it's great that everyone can view their opinions. I have basically a couple points that I want to talk about. In 1993, I was elected. I spent about 10 years in the political system in BC. And I spent some time in council, and we went through this sidewalks 30 years ago and access points for everybody, so it's equal and everyone can be served. Another one is when we make decisions and taking into consideration everyone's opinion and requiring professional conduct from elected officials is really important, and having government experience and understanding what governance is at top of mind as well. And when I look at Calgary now, and as opposed to 10 years ago, I see many changes, both economically and socially. We all understand that COVID has created many new challenges and amplified our present economic problems, and Calgary's in a bit of a slump. And we need to change directions if we were going to meet the needs of Calgarians and get this just our systems more in place and tend to the needs of all Calgarians. And that obviously that all starts at City Hall by electing action-oriented people like myself to get things done. I'm an action-oriented person, period. And over the next couple months, you'll see people waving their arms and stating promises, everything under the sun, just to get elected. And that bothers me a bit. And friends, I asked you to look past the smiles and look at me posts and think about who can actually get the job done. We have lots of challenges and we need to come together as a group. And I'm confident that I have that expertise to create and implement the required changes so we can once again live in a safe and aspiring city. I believe we need to continue to ensure we provide equal opportunity for all, young, old, and accessibly challenged. What this means to me is sidewalks, facilities, businesses are designed in such a way that any person utilizing a wheelchair, a walker, or simply has difficulty walking does not experience any difficulties to navigate our streets by traveling through or around potholes, cracks in the sidewalks, and are having to jump over a curb because it was not maintained properly or did not have access points or poor access points, as Jacob said. To achieve all of this, we need to put a lot of thought into what we, and that's all constituents, want our city and neighborhoods to look like. It's also important to note that we live in a winter environment and we will get ice and snow, sometimes more than enough. And when this happens, we need to clear the roads and the sidewalks before we even attempt to clear any bike paths, and do it in a timely manner. Our livelihoods and safety of our communities depend on it. To ensure our city and all these things, we need to ensure that people have jobs as well, because everything's funded by money. And the private sector is the driver in all of this. Without industry and small business, none of these necessities would be possible. And to have a well-run city, we need to elect candidates like myself with very diverse backgrounds in governance, administration, and hands-on experience. A smiling face and nice words and limited experience can be very detrimental to any city. You know, creating a city that is accessible and prosperous takes time, energy, vision, and the ability to do the job. Cities and towns have a responsibility to help those that have challenges or are unable to help themselves. This is why
The candidate got 1 minute.
this is why we have
Again,
social
1 minute.
programs, shelters, and places like the Salvation Army, Mustard Seed to help out. And when these institutions become overloaded like they are now, indicates there is a systematic problem. And right now we have people, families losing everything because of economic collapse. And as Ronald Reagan said, government is not the solution to our problem, government is the problem. In closing, I have having a city that is everything to everyone is a challenging and itself, as someone will always be left out. We still need to make an actual honest effort to help. Creating a safe and healthy neighborhoods and that provide opportunity and accessibility to everyone needs to be the top of the council's mind during every discussion. Ensuring that we can be self-reliant as families and communities, and by supporting private industry, we can live, we can keep living in an, good Lord, we can keep living expenses affordable and once again enjoy prosperous environments in our and around our city. Thanks.
Thank you, Brent Trenholm. I just want to let everyone know I can hear now. So hopefully this will go smoothly. Thank you, Andrea, for taking over for me. Our next candidate is Andrea.
Angela McIntyre, Ward 4.
That's me. Hello. Thank you so much to the Disability Action Hall for setting up this really, really important conversation. I know how much trouble it is to wrangle candidates and try and get us all together in one place. So I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate hearing everybody's views. It's pretty exciting to hear how we can make this city better. So people with disabilities, whether they're visible or invisible, have the tremendous ability to navigate a world that's built for, what's considered normal people. So the constant need to adapt creates risk takers and innovators and strong advocates for all people. If allowed, what we overcome and how we overcome it helps us to build solutions and opportunities for a better future. So what does that mean? That means centering multiple voices, like the Disability Action Hall, in planning cities with the opportunities to do better. And I think we need to start by asking what isn't accessible. And then we need to listen, we need to observe, and we need to adapt based on community needs. We need to design for disability first. As we revitalize our neighborhoods, we need to prioritize accessibility. We have beautiful existing structures within our existing neighborhoods, and we can make sure that they're accessible in all kinds of ways. We need to strengthen our transit system. We need to implement a good design policy that benefits everyone. We need to build attainable housing that's affordable, but also strengthens our social safety net. So that means that our wraparound services to do with mental health and wellness are also provided in a timely manner. It also means when we're creating affordable housing, we're setting people up to succeed. So when we get people into places, potentially we haven't lived in a house before, we need to make sure that, for even me growing up in Edgemont, my dad didn't tell me when to change the furnace vent or when you should do certain things. So in order to create these affordable housing situations, we have to make sure that we're setting up people for success. And City Council must provide all information in plain language documents. The goal is to get rid of barriers that prevent people from participating in life. That means that an accessible city can benefit everyone. It can raise tourism dollars because everyone from everywhere can make sure that they feel comfortable in a city that they can navigate around. That means supporting and actually bringing together apps and technology that will help people navigate the city streets, and the transit ways. That means creating a transit system that connects people to where they need to go in a timely
Candidate, 1 minute, boy.
Thanks, Lloyd. I appreciate
Okay.
that. So one of the things that we also have to remember is that representation matters. Representation in educational curriculum and in politics matters. So we need to support training for educators to understand that kids are differently abled. And can you imagine a classroom where an ADHD kid like myself as a class clown wasn't looked at as troublesome, but perhaps that was looked at as something that could benefit people in a meaningful way. So I think we need to make sure that we're setting up people for success and that we are partnering and making a strong city together. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela McIntyre. And our next candidate
is Tudor Dinca, Ward 5.
Hello, everyone, and thank you very much. As other candidates have mentioned, I want to start off by thanking the Disability Action Hall for organizing this webinar and offering all candidates a platform to express their thoughts on how they would contribute towards making Calgary even more accessible to those who might be living with a disability. In order to present my perspective, or if you will, my personal lens on how Calgary can be better in this respect, I want to share with you how my awareness of this issue has evolved over time. I had immigrated to Canada when I was 13 from my native country of Romania in 2001. And within the first couple of years, I did notice a number of people with disabilities, not only in my school, but in society in general. This number jumped out at me because, I had very little recollection of seeing people with disabilities in my own country and even in my hometown. After 6 years of living in Canada, I had returned back to Romania in order to visit my family and friends. And one of those friends, a neighbor, unfortunately, due to a car accident, had suffered a disability that had forced him to live in a wheelchair and using that wheelchair on a regular basis. I spent a good amount of time with him, and he explained to me the challenges that came with it in our hometown and even around his residence. And that really opened my eyes to two main reasons why I had seen so few people in my native country. The first aspect was because the cultural angle. Unfortunately, many Romanians see people with disability as something that should be out of sight, or as bad luck or misfortune to the individual or family that is caring for that person. Due to this attitude, many people with disabilities are reluctant to spend time in very public places in order to avoid the judgmental looks and thoughts of other members of their community. This cultural aspect leads to the second reason why I never really saw many individuals with disabilities in my hometown. And that's because their non-presence in the public arena or their placements in the blind spots of society led to city planning that simply did not take their needs into consideration. the lack of ramps, elevators, or other infrastructure in essential public places in Romania, which is a developing country, was remarkable, but in a negative way. And just as a quick tangent, even when I still go back visiting family and friends, I see certain ramps that should be making more public facilities accessible so steep and so difficult that I think even Olympic athletes would have sincere challenge getting up them, unfortunately. So this experience really opened my eyes on how important these details are in our society, how we build our roads, how we build our public infrastructure, and how we plan for the future to be as accessible to everyone as possible. Now, also these experiences have also helped me realize how lucky we are in Canada. There's no doubt that we are ahead of the curve compared to the rest of the world. But even so, there's always room for improvement. In Ward 5, where I'm running for City Council, there are still neighborhoods that are 30 to 40 years old that were built during a time where the city was not as considerate about the needs of people with disabilities as they are today. And it is incumbent on the new councillors and the new council as a whole to direct administration towards the modernization of these neighborhoods, their streets, their public spaces, the public transit, to be as accessible as possible for those who live with disabilities. Lastly, we need to provide more education of examples of individuals and leaders that have achieved important milestones in our city and province, and place them as important point of references to those who live and come from countries or communities like my own, and to encourage them to be more involved, active, and not to limit themselves and their life.
Candidate, 1 minute, Ryan.
Thank you so much. And to limit themselves due to their disability. Again, I truly believe that Canada is a role model for the world when it comes to a culture of dignity towards those who might be living with a disability, but we must always strive to do better. And I truly believe by doing so, as a positive to our city, we can make it more accessible and more welcoming, not only to those who have a disability, but for everyone as a whole. Thank you very much again for this opportunity to speak. And I hope to be giving the opportunity as an elected official to contribute towards the betterment of the city for all the residents in Calgary. Thank you.
Thank you, Tudor Dinca. And our next candidate is?
Erin Waite, Ward 7.
Hi, everybody. It's great to see my Action Hall friends. I look forward to joining you on a Thursday night get together when we're all back in person. Great to see everybody. Thank you very much for inviting me to this evening. My personal history with disability is something I would like to share just for a minute. I joined Connections, an agency that's PDD funded and supports parents with cognitive challenges. And these are parents that without support would often lose custody of their children, even though with just a little bit of consistent support, they manage a safe and nurturing home. While at Connections, I created a financial coach program that included a match savings aspect. And we helped hundreds of individuals each year access benefits and credits that were there for them, and yet they weren't easy to access, all kinds of barriers in place. And so I learned a lot from those experiences. In fact, in my 10 years at Connections, I learned something new every day, and from the hundreds of families that were part of Connections. But the two biggest learnings for me are what will shape how I would be a councillor for City Council. One was the learning about how many disabilities are invisible, and part of that is that importance of listening to lived experience. With invisible disabilities, people are overlooked. There's a stigma, and we're all quick to talk about ramps and physical accessibility, but there's all kinds of other points of accessibility and issues, and those are so often left unconsidered. And so that was an important learning for me. And lived experience is so key. I found that it's so important to listen to people and understand truly what issues are from a person's experience. Often while at Connections, I'd get asked why I put so much time and energy into advocacy for disabilities when it really didn't affect me personally, because I don't have anyone directly in my life who's in my family life affected by a disability. And at first I thought maybe I don't have a right to be involved in advocacy for disabilities if it doesn't affect me, and maybe that risks me speaking on behalf of others, and that's not appropriate. But then I thought, why not me? Why shouldn't the rights for people with disabilities matter to me as much as they do to anybody else? If I believe in a just society, then I do need to speak up for people, even people that, you know, different than me. It should be just as important to me. And so I redoubled my efforts to advocate, and I feel it's very important. So what I would like to do as part of council after learning these perspectives, I think are fairly small things, but they're things I'll make a priority. And I hope that combined, they have a profound difference. I want to ensure that I always am hearing lived experience directly. I've learned that there are many advocates or family members that are well-intended. They love their family member, they love the people they advocate for, but they're speaking for that person. And sometimes those views aren't the views of the individual they're speaking for. And that's something I learned, and it's a subtle difference, but a huge difference. And I want to always ask that extra question and to check in and be sure that I'm truly hearing firsthand direct input and not filtered through someone else who's trying to represent.
One minute, Ryan, to the candidate.
Thanks, Lloyd. I'll also work hard to ensure policy and priorities include a disability lens up front, not as a little side committee or after the fact, which we all see so many times. We have to build it in early and listen to people early so it shapes policy, not tacked on after the fact. And finally, I'm joining Angela in her call for plain language. It's something Drew Farrell, the current councillor in Ward 7, is loud and clear about, and I'm going to pick up that torch from her, and I'm going to keep yelling about that until we get that as a practice for City Council. So with tight budgets at every level of government, I can guarantee you I will protect values and ensure our limited resources don't hurt those who can least afford to absorb it. And that'll be my approach to honoring, I think, what disability voices and people's perspectives, and ensure that it is reflected at City Council. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Erin and Waite. Now we welcome our next candidate.
Courtney Walcott, Ward 8.
Sorry, thank you all for having me. And I guess I'm kind of a little lucky being in the middle, because you get to hear all of the great ideas and be inspired by everybody else. And then we'll have a chance to share my own. And I'll start with something very simple for me. And so I'll start with two things, actually. One of them is, as a teacher at Western Canada High School, it's one of the oldest schools in the city, if not the oldest. I wouldn't fight that battle right now, but it's definitely not new. And there's a challenge that we face every single day and every year that we go about organizing our classes. You see, the way that school was built 100 years ago was that the three different buildings that kind of make up the majority of that space are separate. Their floors don't even technically align when you walk across. You end up going down some stairs and up some stairs. There's one elevator in the main building. And it wasn't until my second year teaching there that I found out I lost a student that I knew I was going to have. And I knew that they were going to be in my classroom. And while all of a sudden on the first day, I looked at the attendance and they were gone. They weren't there, and I didn't know why. So I pursued and I asked, and something had happened or at some point, so I won't divulge any personal information, that made it so that this student was no longer able to do the stairs. And now, normally I would think, well, we have an elevator, but then I realized again that our school was built in a way in which there are only a certain number of classes that are actually accessible by elevator. There are 2 separate floors that you cannot get to in our school if you are someone who cannot do stairs. And that type of infrastructure, I never really had to pay attention to because, of course, of the privilege that I carry with me. But nonetheless, it was something that I never had to think about. And all of a sudden, it was right there in front of me. I knew this student was mine. And here they were, and now they were in someone else's class because they couldn't physically get to mine. And you start to look at other aspects of the world and you ask some serious questions about how we build our infrastructure, who's sitting in the room when that infrastructure is being built, and most importantly, based on who's in that room, what blind spots are we missing because we are not thinking about things that do not impact us? The second part, this second kind of major learning that I've experienced in my life is actually one from a while ago when I was younger. And it's about my mother. And she herself was someone who in her later years ended up in a wheelchair. And I remember learning really fast that I'll never truly understand her experience. I didn't know, like, she didn't deserve any pity. She was just a matter of like the life that she ended up leading was one that I think I could understand, but I would never truly know what that felt like. So I made a commitment. It's a very simple one really early on, is that if I ever find myself in a position where I can support and help people, I must acknowledge the fact that if I am not someone who it's personally impacted by, then my job becomes one of amplification. I have to lift someone else up to tell me exactly what they need. And that's what ended up happening with my mother when I was growing up, is that instead of me assuming what she needed, she would inform me, and my job was simple enough, and it was to listen and to follow through, because no one really knows what they need more than the individual themselves. So now, as I seek to take a position on council, it's really all about continuing both of those learnings. What infrastructure are we building to make sure that people have access to absolutely everything? And 2, what voices are we carrying with us and bringing and lifting up and pulling us, like getting a seat at the table, so that when we are starting to create these plans and policies, their voices can be
1 minute going to the candidate.
perfect. So that's the big idea, is really, it's how do we bring people to the table equitably? The reason why I reference equitably, of course, is because every planning structure that we have, every issue that we see, it doesn't affect everybody equally. So it's most important to lift up and amplify the voices of those that the issues impact the most and that are in the most need. And that strategy, it's one that I plan on bringing with me when we look to adopt a universal design and accessible planning strategy for public spaces and infrastructure. We want to, I want to enhance the standards for accessible sidewalk, bike, street detours, especially infrastructure and construction modification, just like we saw this year with temporary structures like patio extensions, like sidewalk repairs. We should have a baseline standard about what this work looks like so that we never really truly disrupt anybody's life. That's what we bring with us into that thinking, what we bring with us to transit, that thinking we bring with us to affordable housing. It's build it for the people that build it so that the people that need the help the most are at the table when we are creating these structures. But I'll leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Courtney Walcott.
We now welcome Gian Carlo-Carra, Ward 9 incumbent. Gian, hello.
Hello, how are you? Let me just get my notes unlocked here. The first thing I want to say is thank you so much to Disability Action Hall for hosting this all candidates debate. I want to thank the organization because you have had, in my 11 years on council, an extremely measurable impact on the decisions that council has made at budget and with regard to increasing accessibility in our city and support services. So that's fabulous. I'm also just inspired by so many of the words that we heard from aspiring candidates, and it's great to be here tonight engaging in this forum. So for the last 11 years, I've been pursuing the 5-point Great Neighborhoods transformation of Calgary. transforming our city from an increasingly polarized and segregated city of suburban sprawl to a city of accessible, mixed use, and mixed income neighborhoods networked with sustainable infrastructure systems. I'm very proud of my record on city building, equitable city building, transit infrastructure, and housing, on services like increased snow and ice funding for pedestrians and active modes, and social supports like fair entry, the sliding scale, and the low-income transit pass. And as has been noted, the three-legged stool of the 10-year plan to end homelessness, the Enough for All poverty reduction strategy, and our recent continent-leading mental health and addiction strategy. I'm seeking re-election because this work is not done. And this is the moment in our history where we either fully commit to that work or that we allow ourselves to get clawed back towards an unsustainable and inequitable status quo, a business as usual. This is a critical moment in our city's history, and it's fabulous, again, that Disability Action Hall is engaging the candidates who will help shape our future at this critical moment. Due to the importance of this moment in our city's history, I've changed my mission statement from great neighborhoods make a great city to rise together. Rise together is centered on three values. Number one, a Calgary that is a beacon of equity and justice, anti-racism, and truth and reconciliation. Number two, a Calgary that is committed to climate action. If COVID-19 has taught us anything, it's that we are all in this together, and it behooves us. We must tackle the next big thing that is facing our global civilization, and that is climate change. And then number three, it's the idea of democracy and dialogue that is under significant assault in the politics of fear, anger, and division that seem to be the flavor of the day. We need a Calgary that understands the critical and interdependent relationship between a thriving and diversified private sector and a strong and supportive public sector. We have to stop electing people to public office who do not believe in government. After years of economic downturn in which we have driven the cost of government downwards while largely protecting frontline services, after taking the savings wrought by that fiscal discipline and creating one-time pockets of money to begin to fund the work of building the city we need to become, we're at an inflection point where we need to begin deep investment in becoming a city for everyone. Rise Together calls for the establishment of 5 dedicated year-over-year funds that will appear as line items on our tax bills and that explicitly list, on top of the day-to-day services that we consume as Calgarians, the contributions that every tax dollar is making towards building a city that will inclusively thrive. The first one is downtown reinvention. One of the pockets of money that we created for one-time funding, we have $200 million in our downtown reinvention plan. It is a really critical piece of work.
1 minute going to the candidate.
Thank you, Lloyd. We need $1 billion. And so we need that one-time fund. We need to fund main streets and transit-oriented development, public realm improvements that improves accessibility and quality of life for all Calgarians. We need a specific fund for accessibility retrofits, livable streets, and active modes, our A5 network. We need a dedicated fund for parks, recreation, and culture. And we need a dedicated fund for the Community Safety Investment Framework, which is an anti-racist 24/7, 365 alternative emergency response that does not criminalize people who are in crisis when we only send in the police and inadvertently criminalize things. I look forward to working with a significantly new council to close the gap in creating a city that includes all Calgarians. And I look forward to working very closely with the ongoing advocacy of Disability Action Hall. Thank you very much for your time and the opportunity.
Thank you, Gian, Carlo-Carra. Who do we welcome next?
We welcome Daymond from Ward 9.
All right, thanks everyone. So my name is Daymond and I'm going to be your local city councilor for Ward 9. And my campaign is focused on serving communities first. So that means getting back to the basics of listening to communities and then finding solutions together. And I just want to say a quick thank you. I guess this is maybe the trend, to the Disability Action Hall for organizing this. I know for myself, I think even for the other candidates in Ward 9, this is the first big forum that has really opened up. So just a big kudos to the team. I know there's a lot that goes into planning this. So thank you very much for organizing it. And so I'll jump in, connecting directly with the priorities that you highlighted. So the first one is we look at a city of safe, inspiring, and healthy neighborhoods. So personally, in the last few years of my dad's life, he actually experienced a few disabilities. And from this experience, I saw firsthand how crucial and critical healthcare professionals and the caregivers are for people with disabilities and their families. So they supported my family and I through what was a really difficult time. So I completely agree when we talk about the need to ensure our neighbors have access to health and social services that not only provide the supports they need, but it also helps them to thrive and be empowered to be influential members of our community. And and we all know that the city plays an important role in really listening to those who live in Calgary and then communicating those needs with the support of our partners like Disability Action Hall to other levels of government. And I know specifically, as everyone is well aware, there's concerns around social and health services. So I think it's really important that we come together and gather the needs and communicate and build relationships with our levels of government. So at the end of the day, we can affect change for those most in need. Now, and then going on to your second point, so a city that moves. I know when I was door knocking in Ramsey, there was a lady that told me that she had just recently moved there with her family. And actually her son, who uses a wheelchair, actually had a lot of struggles getting around over the last few months. And especially in Ramsey, there's a lot of hills, not to mention when there's snow and ice, it makes it a fairly dangerous situation. So that's why I support prioritizing certain main pathways and roads to make sure they're cleared and to make sure that everyone can, that all Calgarians can get around, even in the winter seasons. And then moving on to the well-run city. So I got to actually work for the Disability Sports Division for the government of Alberta. And specifically, I worked for a team to help people with FASD. So that's fetal alcohol spectrum disorder. And the most important lesson that I learned from that experience is the importance of community-led initiatives, and then also listening to lived experience. And then, like I mentioned, we need to apply, or like you mentioned in your values, is that we need to apply an equity and inclusion lens. So this way we can make sure that we listen to those in community to find out what their needs are before making any decision that impacts their lives. And I support improving engagement by repairing relationships with community and City Hall. And I'll do this by producing consistent and predictable processes for engagement. So people are informed and they know when and where they can raise their voice. And most of all, we can ensure that no voice is left behind. And then the final point around a prosperous city. So when I did my master's in public policy, I chose to do my capstone project on inclusive education. So I got to look at how to improve learning and inclusion in schools for kids with disabilities. I know in that circumstances, some of their needs have been missed. And I know Courtney mentioned that as well. So for the last few years, I've worked at the Calgary Homeless Foundation and to help make sure that everyone has a place to call home. So I agree that we need to have a city that's affordable and accessible.
One minute, going to the candidate.
Okay, thanks, Lloyd. So I'll work with our community partners to make sure that we build more affordable and accessible housing in our city. And I know a big part of that will be working with our other levels of government and obviously listening to community and partnering with community to affect that change and reach that goal. And yeah, I'll just close things off by saying my favorite thing is when people are empowered to affect change in their community. So I do really look forward to working with the Disability Action Hall and then also my colleagues on council in the fall. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thank you, Daymond Can, and we apologize for the mispronunciation of your last name.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Thank you. And now we would like to welcome
Tim Lipp, Ward 9.
Hey friends, thank you for, can you hear me okay? Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak and for holding this forum. It's great to listen in, hear all these different conversation points. I first off want to start by saying I'm not an expert in this area, but I know you are. So if you have any other great ideas for things I missed, please send me an email, me at timlippyyc.ca. That's not Tim Lippy, it's Tim Lipp YYC. But I just want to share 3 quick stories from the past, the present, and the future, and how I see Calgary evolving as a city to make it much more friendly to people with different levels of ability. The first one from the past is one from several years ago, before I even had the crazy idea to run for city councilor, and that was when I was volunteering on a neighborhood community association in Marda Loop. And our volunteer crew went around to all the neighborhood corners and created a map of places that were difficult to access if you were in a wheelchair. And that just struck me as a really good activity of neighbors helping neighbors through this structured mechanism of community associations, which is a great encouraging story that I think we all can be more a part of. And that's the kind of thing that I really want to support. So that's something from the past. Something from the present is I've already started with my neighbors purchasing things together. And what that does is we know that our lives are incredibly busy, incredibly hectic, and the pace of life is getting faster and faster for each of us. Every single generation, we have more and more stuff to do. And if from a kind of neurodiversity lens, that incredibly fast pace of life can make life more difficult for everyone. And especially those who have different levels of ability. And so to help deal with that in the present, I've already worked with my neighbors and facilitated the process of us purchasing things together that we need on a regular basis so that we can save money, but also we can actually have to make less decisions, be less stressed about making sure that we'll get eggs delivered that week. So that's something from the present. And something from the future is, and this is a little bit uncharacteristic, and this isn't necessarily tied to my campaign, but I found some people organizing a huge celebration of car-free living in Inglewood on August 29th, and we're trying to organize a really big dance party on the street. Now, I know that doesn't sound like it has anything to do with disability action, but as more and more people are getting mobile in their neighborhood and rolling around, they're going to realize how difficult different parts of the neighborhood are to access. And that kind of ingrained empathy in people will not only help increase their awareness and empathy with those at different levels of ability, but also help build connections in the neighborhood, which is going to be really important as we're facing the climate crisis. So those are 3 quick stories for how I'm going to be involved, but please reach out to me and I'd love to hear from you. I also want to thank the other candidates for being involved in this forum. You're bringing really important issues to light. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Thank you, Tim Lipp. Who is our next candidate, Andrea?
Tony Dinh, Ward 10.
All right. Hello. Good evening, everyone. So thank you so much for the Disability Action Hall for hosting this. I also admittedly am not an expert in this, so I actually came here to learn a little bit more. But I do want to share about my experience with accessible needs. So my background, I'm a builder. And so what I had done in the past, one of my tenants, she had a family and her daughter was in a wheelchair. And so I helped her access the grant so that she could have full accessibility in the house that she was leasing there. And so what that looked like was they came and they widened the pathways. As her daughter got older and bigger and heavier, she needed a new wheelchair, an electric one. And so what happened is they brought in the lift there, and then so she was able to get lifted onto the stairs, and they built a wooden enclosure, and then so she was able to get into the home safely and conveniently. And then they put the harnesses in the bath and in her, and also in her her bedroom. And so with that, like that is my experiences with the accessible needs. Now, with my background as a builder, specifically in Ward 10, we have a project called the Rundle Manor. And so it is 135 units, I believe. And so it's really thoughtfully planned, and it has accessible needs in there. And so what that would look like is the covered parking. So for winter and whatnot, that they don't need to do the snow removal and whatnot. And so I'm a huge fan of that, total advocate for the affordable housing. And so what I would really push, and so we have a major shortage in Calgary. We have 15,000 units short for affordable housing, and we need to ensure that the accessible needs are included in the affordable housing. And I know that there is a shortage for rentals. I know there's a shortage for all kinds of accessible housing, and that's affordable. And so I would really push for that, for the affordable housing, and close that gap on the 15,000. And I think that's something I'd welcome, championing that, as you know, with a legitimate resume. And so, you know, with you know, when I looked at Ward 10, and so my tenant, she actually left me and she went to Ward 10. She went to Whitehorn, and I was really wondering, what can we do for Ward 10? Because I see other wards and they open new fields and all these different parks. And I wanted to see, what can we do for Ward 10? And I actually really wanted to do a universal park, something that we can have for ourselves and we can be proud of. And that's unique to Ward 10, as that's an established community. And that we could have the best park, you know, with engagement, you know, with community, you know, on board. I think that would be really interesting, you know, project. And so I would try to work for that. Now, you know, I read on the news the other week, there was this art program, and it was designed with accessible needs in mind, and that it's designed for accessible needs. And so, and others can access it also. So it was really in mind with, you know, accessibility, and that's inspiring. And I think that's really great that someone would do an art project like that. And, you know, I think we need more of that. And so, you know, I understand with the low income passes, that's a need there. So I think the main thing is really just closing the gap.
1 minute, Ryan, to the candidate.
Thank you so much, Lloyd. So, you know, I think we just got to really ensure with, you know, when we're building our city, that the city needs to be resilient, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to be accessible with universal design. And with that, I'm complete.
Okay, folks, thank you, Tony Dinh. And will the next candidate, Andrea?
Abed Harb, Ward 10.
Hello, thank you everyone. Thank you Disability Action Hall for hosting this event and for bringing us all together to talk about this very important topic. Like I said, my name is Abed Harb and I'm running in Ward 10. Disability issues and accessibility is a very personal issue to me. It's very near and dear to my heart. I've spent time volunteering with the CNIB, the Canadian National Institute for the Blind. And in the context of this municipal election, I think it's exciting to see the potential of accessibility. Governments have recognized, but are beginning to recognize more and more how important it is to have the accessibility lens on all projects as in an early stage. And as we all know, accessibility is a wide variety of issues. There are people that have low vision or mobility issues or other physical or non-physical challenges. And it's really exciting to see the potential, if there's an interest at the government level, to include these different perspectives early on, because there are certain solutions that are actually quite simple, but unfortunately, due to lack of awareness, you know, entities, builders, governments don't recognize what they need to do to make things more accessible. Ward 10 is a very established community ward. It has a lot of established communities in it. And unfortunately, that part of the city tends to get neglected. And that's one of the reasons why I'm running, to make sure that we get our fair share. There are a lot of cracked sidewalks where the roots are starting to break through the sidewalk. And it makes it literally impossible for someone who's in a wheelchair to be able to travel across the community. And so it's really important that we address these challenges. And as we revitalize these neighborhoods, prioritize accessibility, making sure that that lens is used as we renovate and revitalize these areas. There are a lot of large parks in the ward with very little going on in them. And so it's exciting to see what the potential of the ward, what could happen potentially in the ward, if only that part of the city would receive its fair share of investments. And, you know, some of the older buildings in the area are very inaccessible to people, especially those with physical disabilities. And so ensuring that these issues are addressed is definitely a priority for me, and finding creative solutions so that even as technology advances, there are solutions to disabilities, to accessibility that we haven't even considered yet because the technology is not there. But as the technology advances, it's really important to incorporate that into projects, into revitalizing the area, and making it a priority. And that's something that's, like I said, near and dear to my heart. We in the Northeast, we in Ward 10, we didn't mind using our tax dollars to help Calgary grow. But now we are at a critical point in our infrastructure's life cycle, where if we don't reinvest in these core neighborhoods, they're going to start to look degraded. With that degradation comes a lot of accessibility issues. So it's really exciting to speak to this group. And I too look forward, if I do get elected as councillor, to meet regularly with people discussing accessibility issues, because depending on what the condition is, there are exciting things that the city can do.
One minute going to the candidate.
Thank you very much, Lloyd. So
Okay.
I myself live with low vision. It's something that I was basically born with, and it's very simple solutions can go a long way in helping people access the city more. And this needs to be a bigger priority for all three levels of government, because it's an important issue, and sometimes it won't even really cost that much. As you look at, you know, when we were all younger growing up, the crosswalks didn't have the walk sound. Now, it probably doesn't cost that much to include that, but it can have such a large impact on people's lives. So my name is Abed Harb. I'm running in Ward 10, and accessibility is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And if I get elected, I promise you, I will engage with Disability Action Hall and other organizations to make sure the city of Calgary is as accessible as it could be.
Thank you, Abed. I just want to remind folks that we do have a Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. If you have any question for the candidate, please put it in there. And if they don't answer it tonight, then we will, like we said at the beginning, hand it off to them so that they can answer it in the coming days. Andrea, who is our next candidate?
Our next candidate is Esther Sutherland, Ward 10. Esther, I think you're on mute still. You're gonna have to unmute first.
Thank you so much to Disability Action to invite me to be part of this meeting. And as well, hello everyone. This is Esther Sutherland. I am running for City Council Ward 10. And I am glad to hear all kinds of projects, ideas, which is good to help to people with disabilities. I am a hardworking people. Right now I am working 6 days a week, and I have to answer hundreds of emails that are write to me. And which is good, because we can see close what are the needs of our people who live in Ward 10. There is a lot of social issues, economic issues to look into to find a good solutions for everyone well-being. And it is very important action, because we can say many nice, beautiful words, desire only, but has to be the action there. Talking about people with disabilities needs. Many years ago, my background is nursing. Many years ago, I was working with an institution where there were a lot disabled person, and I noticed something. People with disability needs, PCAs, caregivers, personal assistant, and support. That is very important to focus. As well, people with disability needs, public transit, affordable, accessible transportation. What I should do in order to accomplish that idea and that knowledge that really they need that public transit. My team and we have to prepare a program and to contact as soon as possible to the Minister of Transportation to let know him what work needs to be done, and be persistent, checking and calling to the Minister of Transportation or the people who are in charge to build roads, to fix roads, so to protect our disabled people. And I noticed that affordable housing is very important for everybody. In my workplace, I was able to see many Canadians born in Canada, disabled people, homeless. They do not have financial help. They do not have free medication. And they are Canadians born in Canada who has been neglected and left behind. So they're disabled people. So we have to apply principles of equal services and human rights. Human rights is not only for one group. Human rights should be applied for everybody equally. Otherwise, if only one group have all the benefits and the other group of people, Canadians, are looking food in the back alleys to sell those cans and bottles to survive with one sandwich a day.
One man running to the
Another
candidate.
is technical aid and equipment, personal assistance and support, education and training job, equal opportunity for disabled and for everyone who are looking for job. And as well, I support the transit path for low income. And there is a lot of work to do. And one thing is to talk, another thing is to have an action, plan, action. And so we can see the result, because right now there is a lot of misery and poverty. That is the fact, that is the reality. Me and my husband were doing philanthropic work. We distribute hampers to low-income people, and we notice a lot of people, disabled people, are homeless. So working together, we are many. That's why many candidates. We have to work together on behalf of everyone to have a great neighborhood, to have a prosperous neighborhood. And always praying to God for help, because nobody's perfect, and we do as best as we can to help others in need, following Jesus Christ's principles. Okay, thank you so much for everything, and God bless you. One moment, please. So hopefully I asked to my neighbors and friends to vote for Esther Sutherland for Councilor Ward 10. Thank you so much. And hopefully we can achieve everything that we we have this with the deep of in our heart, we want to help others. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Esther Sutherland.
Okay.
And now we welcome Lauren Hershel from Ward 11.
Hey everybody, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here, and it's been really awesome to hear what all the other candidates have to say. It's you know, it's kind of a blessing to be going as one of the last, although a lot of the ideas I have are shared, which I think is awesome because it means you know, we're all really focused on solving some problems. So one of the reasons why I'm running is because I'm just really passionate about Calgary. I think it's a really great place, but I think it's only a really great place if we all have that shared experience. It can't just be great for some people. I think it has to be great for everybody. I guess a little bit about my background. Personally, I grew up with some family members that had mobility challenges. One of my aunts was a polio survivor. So I was made aware at a very young age, and I guess to echo what Courtney said, you know, I wouldn't fully understand her experience, but I obviously developed some empathy and understanding in terms of what it was like for her navigating the world, especially, you know, if we go a little bit further back in time. Professionally, I've got a background in the building industry, in the not-for-profit sector, and I also worked for the Calgary Public Library. And I guess I'll touch on the library for a quick second. So I was part of the team that opened up the new Central Library. And obviously we were very excited. It was a great day for Calgary. And I was part of the communications team until we realized that it wasn't a great day for everybody in Calgary who was trying to access the library. There were a number of, you know, I guess we'll say challenges or perhaps bad design elements that made the experience not what it could be for people with mobility challenges. And there were a lot of workarounds made, and you know, we were encouraged to keep delivering the message that, you know, everything is great and this is a great achievement for the city. But quite frankly, that really frustrated me because while it was a great achievement for the city, we missed the mark for some people. And I think there was an opportunity there for the city and the library to own up to that and say, hey, you know, there are some things that we could have done differently, and really listen and find ways to work around that so that people had an equal experience with the library. I think having a background in a lot of different sectors actually really gives me a great insight in terms of what we can do from an issues and opportunity perspective to improve accessibility across the city. You know, I know how the development industry works. I know how, you know, city partners work. So I think for me, that will allow me to get in there and really understand where some of our roadblocks are and what we can do to move ahead. Some of the things I'm focused on, you know, it's across the board really, but to me, it's really important that we have a strong job market. And that's for everybody. I know a lot of people who are facing mobility challenges or invisible disabilities, they are underemployed or not employed at all when that's not necessary. And I think that's something that we can relatively easily address if we just change some perceptions and some attitudes across the city. Part of my research prior to building my platform, I specifically sought out various different people who were accessibility consultants and, you know, heavily involved as accessibility advocates to really understand their lived experience and where they saw, you know, everything from more complicated things that the city needed to work on to what some really easy wins would be. Because I thought that was really important so that I was coming at it, not just from, you know, my bystander viewpoint, but, you know, people who are, that's their day-to-day, what they're trying to improve as their professional career.
1 minute more into the candidate.
No worries, thank you. So to me, that's really important that, you know, we listen and we don't just jump ahead with our own assumptions. Really quickly, housing affordability and choice, as many of the other candidates have mentioned, that's super important. I think we have a lot of work to do there just to make sure that there is that choice and type of accommodations for people across the city, regardless of where you are, what stage of life you're in. And I know in Ward 11 specifically, a lot of our neighborhoods fall short on that. So there's, you know, because the communities were just designed in a different way. So that's something where I think, you know, that's a longer term solution. But then again, some of the things we've talked about in terms of snow clearing and fixing sidewalks, those are some easy wins that I think will really improve the day-to-day for all Calgarians, but especially those living with mobility challenges. You know, other than that, I just echo, I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really happy to have had this experience and to hear all these really wonderful ideas.
Thank you very much, candidate Hershel.
And we now welcome Geoffrey Vanderburg from Ward 11.
Good evening. Thank you again to the Disability Action Hall for organizing this evening. It's been enlightening, not to use a word that's too strong. In fact, in particular, I appreciated the presentation by Jacob McGregor, one that had a memorable impact for me. And I think there's nothing like listening to that lived experience. I've been taking lots of notes this evening. So, you know, when I look at the goals of the Disability Action Hall, I see lots of common ground. For example, I too am in favor of working towards a better Alberta for everyone. I too am interested in listening to people's stories, taking action and changing lives. Broadly speaking, I'm also in agreement with your 5 areas of focus. I understand the value of disability pride and culture. I understand the value of relationships and networking, and I think we should all have access to the services that we need. I think we should all have access to the money that we need. And most importantly, I think for many of us, I think we should all have access to the homes that we need. We should all have a home. The challenges arise in how to achieve those goals. And that's where advice from organizations such as the Disability Action Hall can be very helpful as City Council implements policies and programs with that disability lens that we've talked about a number of times this evening. Before I go any further, I just want to tell you a bit about myself. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Communication Studies from the University of Calgary and a Master of Arts from Western University in London in Ontario. In addition to serving as the Managing Director of an investor relations firm, I'm an instructor of public relations at Mount Royal University, and I'm a longtime volunteer. I served on the board of the Lakeview Community Association for 15 years, including serving as president. And I served as a director of the Glen Lake Minor Hockey Club for 5 years. And I serve on the board of River Park Church. And River Park Church has a strong connection to the disability community. In fact, we have an active friendship group that is a group for adults with developmental disabilities. So it's something very important to our church community. Before joining my current employer in 2001, I worked in the newsroom of the Calgary Herald and Edmonton Journal. And my wife, Jennifer, and I have 4 children, and we live in the community of Lakeview in Southwest Calgary. So I have lots of experience in education, but I humbly admit I do not have all the answers, especially as they relate to the issues facing people with disabilities. I've never been in the shoes of someone with a disability, and I don't pretend to know what it's like to live with a disability. What I can say is that I will do my part as a member of City Council to ensure that the City of Calgary is taking into consideration the unique needs of people with disabilities. Understanding and empathizing with those who have disabilities is of paramount importance. That means reading the City of Calgary's gender equity, diversity, and inclusion strategy. It means reading documents such as the diversity and inclusion in the workplace framework. It means reading through helpful materials on the Disability Action Hall website, which was very informative. It's also worth noting that I volunteered at the Alberta Children's Hospital for 30 years. And that was starting when I was in high school. And by interacting with people with disabilities, I learned about some of their challenges, some of their mobility challenges. I learned to adjust my posture to their eye level when speaking to people with disabilities. And something very basic, I learned to ask if someone needed help before simply making an assumption and providing that help. So these are lessons that can be carried into City Council and through all the work that is done at the city, just in a more macro level. I've also been granted a unique perspective on disabilities from my wife, who has worked with special needs children in our local elementary school for the past 8 years. Her experience interacting, teaching, and guiding nonverbal children, many of whom are on the autism spectrum, showed me that there's so much more to be learned from these children. They're smart and they're capable, and they need to be treated as such.
For the candidate.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Lloyd. With the appropriate supports in place, supports designed to bring out the best in both the children and the educators working with them. So learning to see the world through a disability lens, in my view, is a matter of respect. So respect is one of the three key words that I'm using in my platform, promising to be reasonable, responsible, and respectful. And a healthy dose of respect will actually go a long way to building empathy, understanding, and trust. So if I'm elected to City Council, I promise to use that lens of equity, inclusion, and fairness to help guide my decisions, to help with budgeting, to help shaping capital projects. I promise to be proactive and to be a good listener. That's very important. I promise to be welcoming, approachable, and to take responsibility for moving in the right direction as a council and explaining our decisions when they're made. I promise not to marginalize people with disabilities, and I promise to help find solutions for people in crisis. I've learned a lot this evening, listening to some of the other candidates, especially, as I said, Jacob, and I look forward to learning more as we continue through the evening into some of the challenges and opportunities facing people with disabilities. Thank you.
Thank you, Geoffrey Vanderburg. Now, before we carry on, I'd like to first welcome candidate to answer questions in the Q&A if you would like to. You don't have to. Like I said before, we will pass these questions on to you, but if you feel like answering some, you can do so as well. Now, I'm not entirely sure, but we have one candidate left, and I don't know if she's here. Teresa Hargrave, if you are here, can you unmute yourself or
give a wave?
Give a wave. Although if she's on the phone, then she won't be able to do that. There's one person on the phone. Okay, I am not hearing her. So, I mean, if she is here and we have missed her, I apologize. There will be another session, so maybe there's an opportunity for her to join on that one if she is on the call right now. So on that note, we are now going to turn to Dinh and Angie, who have been following questions from the audience for candidates to consider in their 1-minute closing address. We will also send, as I've said a few times now, we will also send all questions and issues from the Q&A to the candidate after the webinar. We will also be going in reverse order when we go to the candidate, beginning with Ward 12. So Dinh and Angie, take it away.
Thank you, Amy. It's a pleasure. I do have the questions here in front of me, and we will remind the candidates about the to summarize your answers in 1 minute. And as Amy had mentioned, we will send the questions to you all after the webinar forum. I don't know if I should read these all at once, but the first question is, candidates, some areas to consider in your 1-minute summary are: how would you make city communications more accessible? What is your vision for an accessible city design? What is your commitment to accessible low-income housing? And what is your communication or commitment, what is your commitment to the fair entry program, including low-income transit pass? All in 1 minute or less, please and thank you.
Just before we go on to the candidate, I just want to add to what Angie said, because one of our panelists would like to ask a question but can't post in the Q&A. And that question is, what will you do to improve Calgary transit access and Calgary transit? So now, on that note, we will carry on to our candidate, and we will be beginning with Geoffrey Vanderburg. I'm right. Geoffrey Vanderburg in Ward 11. Geoffrey.
All right, I think on that question of communication, that's my area of strength. I teach communication, I practice communication. So, but in terms of putting on that communication disability lens, I think it's important that we put ourselves in the shoes of those who are the users, and make sure that we're providing alt tags on images, and make sure that we're make sure that the text is readable. And I think that's it's really important to go through that process of putting yourself in the shoes and then interviewing those who are the users and making sure that that they themselves are finding that to be a good experience. So, well, I can't say what I might do on every motion in terms of voting this way or that way, because I'm only one member of council and there's 15 people on council. What I can say is that I will advocate on your behalf. And I want to emphasize that message today. Specifically, I want to talk about the fact that I do my part to ensure accessible public transit. We talked about that this evening, appropriate street furniture, sidewalks with ramps, and sidewalks that are free of barriers. So these are some of the things that I heard this evening that I want to emphasize that I would advocate on your behalf for. I'll do my part to ensure timely snow removal and to make city-owned facilities such as libraries and recreation centers welcoming and accessible. So that's in a very short nutshell, try to address some of those questions that we received.
Andrea, thank you very much, Geoffrey. Andrea, just before you introduce the next candidate, I'm sorry, I realized I forgot to say, Lloyd will be a little bit more forceful since each candidate only has 1 minute. And if you go over that 1 minute, then you will be muted. So just to be aware of that. Andrea, go ahead.
Lauren Hershel, you have 1 minute.
Thank you. Again, thanks for having us tonight. I think for me, what sums up, I think, all of those issues is I really want to make sure that everybody in Ward 11, in my ward, has a voice. And I think we need to always keep that front of mind, that everybody has a different experience. And we need to make sure we're not just listening to the loudest voice, or those who speak up all the time. To me, if I just quickly go with those issues, the fair entry program is super important to me for a variety of reasons. I think in terms of accessibility of city designs, Calgary really should be striving to be a leader in that. A lot of the codes are outdated and that shouldn't matter. We should be going above and beyond. I think that's the kind of city we are. And I think that's the kind of city we want to be going forward. So that's really my take on things. And again, thank you so much for having us tonight.
Thank you, Lauren Hershel. Next, we have Esther Sutherland, and you have 1 minute.
To be in contact with the Minister of Transportation, to check if the work is done, and for everyone well-being, as well to check if transit pass is available for people in need. Affordable housing is very important because everybody, no matter could be homeless or no homeless, everybody needs a place to call home. We cannot make discrimination to homeless because it is time to clean up the corrupt system, and never is too late to establish a righteous system for everyone well-being, to praise and to ask forgiveness to the Lord for the wrongdoing, and to ask in prayer to the Lord to help us to do a good, righteous work for everybody well-being. And I can say, God bless you. There is a lot of projects, like we mentioned, technical aids and equipment, affordable housing, education, and so on. And that work has to be done. Action is very important. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you. So Abed, Harb.
Thank you. I'll be real brief because we only have a minute, but I think the accessibility lens needs to be more of a priority in all future developments. We must make sure that all neighborhoods, but specifically in Ward 10, all the sidewalks have ramps so that they're accessible for those who are wheelchair bound. We must make sure we have timely snow removal, and that the sidewalks themselves are flat and safe for those walking on them or using wheelchairs on them or canes. It's really important that we recognize that this is a priority, and that how we treat those who have accessibility issues is a way that we judge a society. And we must be not just a continental leader, but a world leader in this space, making sure that accessibility is number one, making sure that all projects, whether renovations or new buildings, making sure that the accessibility lens is a priority in development. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abed. Next we have Tony Dinh, Ward 10. You have 1 minute.
All right. I love the rigor you guys are bringing here with the 1 minute. So thanks so much for my opportunity here. So, I think as we think about the future of cities and making resilient cities that are inclusive, they're equitable, and with universal design, there's never been a better time to have the builder in City Council. And as we build our homes, the affordable homes, my vision is that I would push for the most accessible homes moving forward, that we could get that and we close the gap on the affordable homes with the all-inclusive universal designs, because as the most livable city in North America, that's a huge gap and that's a big missing here. And we really need someone with a legitimate resume that's going to champion that, and that we will be the most livable with everyone included. And I'll finish on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Tim Lipp.
On the first point of communication, really simple. I would hire someone from the disability community to work in my office because I don't know what I need, and I think it's important to have someone from the community helping me guide how I communicate. So sharpen your resumes. The second point in terms of affordable housing, I'm very incentivized to act on this because I actually live in an affordable housing complex, and that's something that I've been fighting for and will continue to fight for. In fact, a bunch of my campaign financing came from some resources that we found in our neighborhood that were going to waste and are now being turned into affordable housing and local greenhouses. So those are two really quick things, and why this is something I'm really passionate about, especially around affordable housing.
Thank you, Tim Lipp. Next, we have Daymond Can, Ward 9.
All right, thanks, Amy. So yeah, I agree. With my experience working at the Calgary Homeless Foundation, I saw firsthand what fair entry in that program did. It made a big difference in the community, so I will fight for that. And then building affordable housing is another big priority of that. The last 3 years, that's been the focus of my work, and I will continue that into City Hall. And then the final point, really, communications and accessible design. I think the emphasis is then engagement, having the right people at the table. And the issue I've been hearing is that people feel that City Hall has become disconnected from the community. So we need new voices who will make decisions that reflect the needs of and the priorities of Calgarians. And that means focusing on what matters to you. So what I bring is I'm a listener and a facilitator. So I'll bring people to the table, and I have the policy background to make sure that we get things done. And I know even personally, I helped to plan the 2017 FASD conference, and it was an incredible experience to hear from those with disabilities, their families, and the professionals that support them. But it's an incredibly inspiring story. So I'm just so grateful that we have the Disability Action Hall raising awareness, bringing voices to those in these circumstances, because we need to hear it. And finally,
Thanks, Daymond. Sorry to cut you off, but we're moving on. Gian, Carlo-Carra, please.
All right, I'll try and fit this in a minute. I have been a huge supporter of Councillor Farrell's work on plain language. I've been a huge supporter of Councillor Chahal's multilingual approach to communications, and all of my campaign material is multilingual. So that's number one. That is my ongoing commitment to accessibility and communications. Tim Lipp lives in my competitor. Tim Lipp lives in an affordable housing project that I helped and was key to getting built in Inglewood, and I'm working on affordable housing throughout the city. We need funding to do all of these things. That's why I'm proposing those 5 funds. And finally, I am a huge supporter of fair entry and the low income pass. And further to that, I believe in a basic income guarantee, and I am working with groups from across the country to talk about the role that municipal government can play in helping to bring a federal or provincial basic income guarantee to all citizens in Canada and all citizens in Alberta, and I'm committed to that work as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Gian, Carlo-Carra. Next, we have Courtney Walcott, Ward 8.
Perfect. Thank you all again for having us here. Fundamentally, sometimes I like to go back to some of the most basic aspects of what we're talking about here, and it's what do we consider to be like a livable and a thriving and a vibrant life here. And all of everything that's been listed, being able to access City Hall, communications, media, being able to find appropriate housing. I think we need to start reestablishing and reflecting on what is the basic rights that we have as citizens that we need to just acknowledge and honor. And I think housing is just, it's a basic human right that the city needs to acknowledge so that we can move forward with some responsible action to do so. And how we move throughout this city, if we're going to keep building the way we build, then transit access needs to be at that same basic level. This is how you thrive in a city. When you look at figuring out how we can get people in and around this city to find a home, it's incumbent on us as councillors to just honestly say what it is. If we're going to say it's important, then we need to honestly take action. And it's important to start that with the honest language around it. And it is a human right. So let's start acting like it.
Thank you, Courtney. Erin, Waite, please.
Hi, I think I'm in sync with Courtney on this. These are values and they have to be upheld. We're going to be under a lot of budget pressure at all three levels of government, but it's a matter of standing up and not compromising values. And what many of us have learned that have been inside nonprofits and providing services is that when we're inconsistent, we put people in and out of crisis, and it costs the system and everybody more, and it compromises rights. So it's actually a strong business case to maintain excellent services and excellent supports that ensure people have a stable and a healthy life. So that is a case I can make, and I've advocated for. A deputy minister in the Alberta government said that I will always call BS, and then I'll always work to yes. So those are skills I'll bring to the table because these are fundamental values, and no budget crunch should ever allow us to compromise our values. And so that all of those attributes that you talked about in terms of transit and accessibility.
Thank you, Erin Waite. Again, I apologize for muting you, but we are moving on to Tudor Dinca, Ward 5.
Great, thank you so much. I'll talk on two topics, just really quick because of the time limitation. First one, I will talk about transit. I think the low income pass is fantastic. It's actually one of the very few bright spots of our transit system, ticketing system. But on the all other categories, Calgary is exceptionally limiting. If you compare Calgary to other municipalities like Montreal, Montreal has way more options for tickets than Calgary does. And for people that don't necessarily qualify for the low income one, we need to increase the amount of choice that they have in that area. When it comes to affordable housing, it is important to mention that according to the Calgary Housing Company, 82% of their stock of affordable houses is actually 30 years old or older. So that's 82%. And only 5% of the current stock was built between 2010 and 2020. It's something we have to address and improve for all those that use these spaces, because 15% of the people that use affordable housing are on AISH and 30% are on income support. So these are something that we definitely have to address. Thank you.
Thank you. Angela McIntyre, please.
Hi, thank you very much. These are questions that I don't think I can answer in a minute, but I'm happy to talk to anyone by phone, by email, by Zoom, by Skype. I'm serving coffee in my front yard. These are very important values to me, but I would like to leave you with some words from Richard Rohr. And he says, help us have the courage to awaken to greater truth, greater humility, and greater care for one another. May we place our hope in what matters and what lasts. And so the city that we're trying to build today is what matters and what lasts. And I'd love to hear all of your ideas personally, and I hope to be able to answer all these questions in a better way. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Angela. Next, we will hear from Brent Trenholm, Ward 3.
Hi, and thank you. With my experience as a tradesman, senior manager in governance, a competitive athlete, and 30 plus years of volunteered, I've always strived to close the gap to make things fair and equal no matter who you are and what you did. And that starts with a lot with listening. But listening is one thing, hearing is another one, and then taking action is really, really important. And answering questions. Too often, people talk and they don't answer the question. And I answer the questions. You can ask the people that 10,000 people I've talked to the doors, the same thing, you know. And we always need to be cognizant of our constituents and their needs and take the time to listen again, right? And accessibility, I mean, roads, sidewalks, buildings, parks, all of it needs to be addressed. I mean, when I look at Ward 3 and how we seem to be ignored up here too often, but we need to increase our transportation network. We need to have a community park and always respect opinions of others and give credit where credit's due and ensure that we deal with the issue.
Sorry to mute you, Brent. Next, we'll have Sonya Sharp, please.
Thank you. And I'm going to just kind of echo what Erin has said about priorities and, and moving forward with the stuff we talk about. It's really important as a government and a new government going in that we really walk the walk if we're going to talk the talk. So I agree with her on making all of this a priority and saying we're going to do it. Regarding the communication, I think it's really important. I know Council Farrell has brought this forward as an ex-city employee. Sometimes we talk in language that no one understands, and I think it's really important that we bring folks to the table to better understand which is the best way to communicate with them at different levels. Intentionally planning our city and designing communities that's universally accessible to everybody. And I will definitely make sure that I continue to push, if I'm successful, in securing operating dollars for affordable housing. And for the Fair Entry program, this program definitely needs to continue and we need to fund this program. Also reevaluate where the program is and where it needs to be. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Sonya. Last but of course not least, we have Jacob McGregor. Jacob.
Okay, rapid fire communication, plain language, yes. We also need to do sign language interpretation of our council meetings that everybody can see. I'd like to get those council meetings on TV again. I want to see an accessible built environment. The standards are out there. The Rick Hansen Foundation has published them. Let's put these in action today, right now. Affordable housing. We need to engage with our developers to incentivize this more, but we also need to decrease the fund crunch and the fees on our citizens so that affordability is more possible. For a long time, good enough has been good enough. Let's be great.
Thank you very much, Jacob. That concludes our evening. We want to thank all of the attendees and candidates for taking the time to share your ideas with us. We encourage you to tune in next week as we welcome more candidates from across the city of Calgary.
I guess I should unmute myself first. Sorry about that. Thank you to all who joined us this evening. We invite you to please register for our upcoming session. Have a good evening. And also do not forget, nothing about us without us. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you as well. Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you to all the candidates that have come and took time to speak and share.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming, Esther. Have a good night.
Everyone. Yeah. Good night. See
Night,
you
everyone.
everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for a great forum.
Yeah.
Night.
You're welcome.
Okay, is it joke time now? No.
Yep. Yep. Have we stopped recording?